I don't know how to start this video. I'm just going to be 100% transparent, 100% honest, share my thoughts. As the title suggests, I am no longer going to identify myself as a vegan. Let me know, what you think about this. Let me know if you think I am wrong or if I'm right.
So, as you've just heard, Jon Venus is no longer vegan, or at least he doesn't class himself as vegan anymore. This is kind of sad because, like I said in the Kalel response, it is really good to have popular figures within the vegan movement. It helps popularize veganism and spread the good message. So let's get into why Jon no longer considers himself vegan.
In the last couple of months, I have really, had very strong feelings about the way that I make content, the way that I've built this persona.
So here we go again with this idea of a vegan persona, as if veganism is almost a mask to wear to the public in this regard, maybe as a content creator. It's the same sort of thing that we heard with Kalel. It seems quite egoistical, and they kind of put forward this idea that they've outgrown veganism, that maybe they're too mature for the label now. And I can't help but think of this as conceited, maybe self-righteous. But, let's just continue.
It's not that I've, portrayed myself falsely online, or that I've, showed a side that isn't genuine. But I've also allowed myself to be pigeonholed into something that isn't exactly 100% who I truly am authentically.
So kind of half confirming what I've just said, this idea that he's being portrayed inauthentically seems to be quite egoistical. Something about him isn't coming across right, and something about his character isn't essentially being portrayed correctly within his content. Something I can't really conceive of in relation to veganism so much, because the way I understand veganism, it should be really about animal exploitation. So my question is, what about veganism is causing him to feel inauthentically portrayed? What about this rejection of animal exploitation does he no longer align his identity with?
In the beginning, I had a lot of strong feelings about this lifestyle in terms of me being new to it, learning so many things that I had no idea about. But it's not me, it's not my life. I wouldn't go and meet someone to talk about veganism, even with vegan friends. The last thing I want to talk about is veganism because, this is old news for me. Like, this is something that I've lived for so long.
Just because veganism's old news to you, Jon, does that make it irrelevant? Just because it's no longer something new to you, does that make it unimportant? Well, of course not. I think it's quite silly to even use that as a reason to say, like, well, veganism's not important to me anymore because I no longer associate myself as strongly with it because of time. Okay, yeah, you're used to seeing animals suffering, or you're used to seeing, these disgusting statistics, and so you've internalized them and you've gotten used to them. But that doesn't make it okay, does it? Like, to know that the number one cause of ocean dead zones is animal agriculture shouldn't make you okay with ocean dead zones. To know about 80 billion animals being slaughtered every year should make you okay with that. And I think this is something that you need to combat. And the way I would recommend combating it is by watching animal slaughterhouse footage again. Sometimes we all need to do that. Sometimes we need that reboot, we need to see why and, where our motivation came from. Why we're vegan in the first place. And I think I've done it in the past with having to get slaughterhouse footage for videos even. I had to watch like Land of Hope and Glory just to get a couple of clips, and it was heartbreaking, and it really reinvigorated me passion for veganism in that regard, and made the importance of veganism as an identifier all more clear.
I don't identify with what the general consensus of veganism is. I just don't. That is the absolute truth.
To say that you are rejecting something like veganism seems to me a little bit counterintuitive. To say that you're rejecting veganism would be like saying that you're rejecting your stance against slavery, or rejecting your stance against child exploitation or worker exploitation. And it doesn't make any sense. You wouldn't reject these things. It seems disgusting to reject these things on a whim. So what can be so prevalent within your life that it would make you take the stance, well, do what you want, it doesn't really matter, I think it just seems a little bit selfish, if anything. So then he goes on to talk about hateful and embarrassing vegans.
The hate that I see online is so embarrassing. It's so, that people lack so much perspective and positivity, and people try to bring others down. And that is something that I really, really don't like seeing out, and I would never want to have any part of that at all. As you grow and as you understand more aspects of life and as you just develop, you realize that there is way more to things that meets the eye.
So I can actually kind of relate to this. There's been times in my experiences of being an activist in just day-to-day activism where I've felt embarrassed about how other activists have been behaving. And that's not to say I disagree with their actions, because I don't. I understand that, tempers and emotions can run high when you're talking about such morally prevalent issues. But there's times when I've thought that behaviours were not only ineffective, but they were socially condemnable. Perhaps using megaphones, I think, in people's faces when not on a march and things like that, I think it can be quite rude.
Violence! It's not food! It's violence! It's not food! It's violence!
And I don't think it helps people approach veganism with the right mindset. With that being said, what unites us as vegans is not our aesthetics. It's not our, behaviors. We're not some sort of, subculture or cult. We're a moral stance. It's our moral convictions that unite us. And I think that's what you need to consider when you're rejecting this label. You're not just rejecting, these people who embarrass you. You're rejecting a part of yourself that says, animal exploitation is just not okay. And I also think this is a pretty poor excuse if you're wanting institutional change. If you leave veganism because all the vegans around you are embarrassing and they're not behaving in a way you think they should be behaving, well then behave in a way you think they should and identify as vegan. Because that is how people will understand veganism. If you leave and you leave all of these angry, perhaps rude vegans behind or embarrassing vegans behind, people are going to start thinking of veganism as embarrassing, as angry and rude, a cult, some sort of negative aesthetic, and that's only going to cause more problems for animal liberation. And I don't even think it helps the situation. Why would you change who you are because of someone else? Now you go on later to say that you should live your own life and you shouldn't let people judge you, or other people's judgment change how you behave.
I don't care how you live your life. We all have one life to live, and you have to live it by your terms and not care about what anyone else thinks. That is how you should live your life, without any fear, without any shame. Just be proud of who you are, share your thoughts, be open, and I think good things will come out of that.
But I think that's exactly what you're doing. I think you're caving to disciplinary pressure. I think you're caving to social tensions, maybe, or something along those lines. You're scared of being seen with certain people.
I'm not embarrassed. I am.
Scared of being associated with certain behaviors, and that's changing how you behave. Now, we all face that time to time, but I don't think it's a good excuse to reject what is a moral stance. So I think you're going to do better than that, John. I really think so, even for yourself. I don't think it's a good reason to change how you would portray yourself to the world and how you would see yourself when you look in the mirror.
I am vegan, I am plant-based, whatever kind of label you want to put on me, whatever. Yes, that is never going to change. I'm not going to go back to eating animal products or something.
So I am actually really glad to hear that he's at least adhering to the philosophical demands of veganism in the regard for animal exploitation and well-being, right? So he's still clearly against eating meat, dairy and eggs, which is good. So he says he's at least plant-based. And I'd like to interpret this as that he still doesn't buy animal products like leather and anything like that, or any form of animal product at all. So it seems that he still adheres to the vegan definition, but not really the prescription. Now, I can kind of understand that he doesn't want to give off this personification of veganism. But I do think that this inhibits the spread of the ethic through our culture. So let me explain why I think the rejection of the label will inhibit the moral progression within our culture. Think of it like this. You're out and about, you're going shopping. Say you get taken out by your family go, let's go and eat at McDonald's. And you go, okay. And then they say, do you want a Big Mac? You go, no, I can't have it, I'm a vegan. Or you're out and about and someone says, oh, what do you think of this bag? Do you want to buy it or whatever? And you go, no, it's leather. And they go, well, so what? And then you go, I'm a vegan. Now, in each of those circumstances, you've answered the question with an identifier. You've said, I'm a vegan, or you've pointed towards veganism. Now, that's important because veganism as an identity, as a collection of values then, serves to explain itself to the other people who then go and look it up. They go, well, what is a vegan and what can they do? What can't they do and why? And this is how we educate people without having to sit there and monologue every single ethical stance we have. I suppose we could just say animal exploitation, but then it's quite vague. Veganism gives people the how as well as the why. How to behave as a vegan. It's almost hegemonic. Now, people might see that as power, and it's somewhat it is. It's power in the sense that it helps people understand how to behave and act within our culture. But it's positive power. It's a tool, it's a guide for people. And I think the rejection of that will only lead to a degradation of vegan ethics. If we don't know whether something is vegan or not, whether it actually adheres to the ethical and moral ramifications of veganism, well then we're going to have to sit there and really deduce in every single situation. People aren't willing to do that, unfortunately. And not only that, some people simply are uneducated in these matters. So they'll just Google, is it vegan? So that's why I think veganism will help institutional change, because ethics are institutional. We understand how to behave because we're taught it by our parents. We're taught it in our schools. We'll learn how to behave in the workplace, in various situations in life. And that is what we need to bring veganism into, so that people understand veganism as part of everyday social experience. So this next part actually confused me quite a bit, because it seems that he cares in the first part where he's like, well, actually the problem's the label, but I still adhere to the ethics. But this next part just took us off guard, this idea of being where he just doesn't care. You'll see what I'm talking about.
I just don't care. Like, if someone wants to quit and eat hamburgers at McDonald's, that is okay with me, 100%. You do you. It doesn't matter. I have no judgment whatsoever. I don't care. I don't care what people do in their own life in terms of dietary choice. I don't care if you don't care about the environment. I don't care if you don't care about your own health. I really don't. I care for myself because for me it doesn't feel good to do certain things, but I have no judgment, or I generally don't feel bad or negative feelings when I see people eating meat. I don't put people who are plant-based or vegan on a pedestal. I don't look up to them more than I do people who live differently. I really don't.
So I think Jon does care about these issues and is facing social ramifications that he doesn't particularly want to deal with. That, or he genuinely doesn't care. But he did make a video after this saying that of course he cared, and that he was trying to say that he doesn't judge. Either way, I'm unconvinced by his rationale. Like, I think that he's making a hasty decision and not the right one for himself either. If he truly believes in these things, then he's inhibiting the growth of his ethic. And if he doesn't believe in these things, well, then he's lying in the first part of the video and he's lying in the second video that he makes to explain it. And I'd like to think that he's not going to do that. So that makes me think that he probably does care and that he's probably not a liar, right? I don't think there's any reason to question the guy's character. I don't think he's a bad guy from what I've seen. I wouldn't say that about him because, well, I don't know him, and I don't think he seems that insincere.
My family hunts, my family fishes, not my own family, but my wife's family. And I love them so much. I don't have anything against them doing that. I did in the beginning, and I think that's natural for anyone that discovers something new that they're really passionate about. I love Catherine's parents, so much, and I just don't care. I just don't feel bad if they go out there and shoot deer.
In many ways, I can really relate to Jon's situation. I have a friend who used to hunt and fishes. I have friends who, eat meat, dairy and eggs, and I have family that eat meat, dairy and eggs. And I've even been mocked for being vegan at times, by your mates that take the mick out of you and stuff like that. And, sometimes it can be tough, it can be difficult. But I think as well, he doesn't want them to see him as judging them. Because, it changes the social situation sometimes. You go in and you are the personification of, or like the antithesis of what their life is. They're hunters, right? He walks in the room, he's a vegan. He might as well be telling them they're wrong in every single situation. Like, you shouldn't be doing this, just with one single look. And, the sad reality is that's kind of a good thing, right? In my opinion, this idea of there's no judgment, no, there's always judgment, right? There's two kinds of people. There's people who judge and there's people who lie about judging, right? Judgment's not a bad thing. It's what frees us from ourselves, right? And let me explain that. We have an understanding of right behavior, right and wrong, and how we live our lives, and we just do, right? And when we act and we behave one way, it's because of this conception of right.
Come, Rainsford, say you will hunt with me.
Hunt men?
Say you will hunt with me!
No. What do you think I am?
One I fear who dare not follow his own convictions to their logical conclusion.
Everyone judges. It's what we do as humans. It's part of what on-deck investigation, as someone like Heidegger might call it. It's a good thing, not just for ourselves, but for everyone, right? And I know everyone likes to think that it's just for everyone else. For example, like we do ethics because everyone else needs to be considered, and sometimes we need to consider ourselves. Well, no, right? Ethics is a positive structure for the individual, right? We enter ethics to free ourselves from our nature, right? Because everyone already thinks they know what's right. You think you know the truth and how to act and how to behave within the world. Now, a lot of the time, we're actually wrong. And we don't know that because our rationality hasn't been questioned. Now, ethical judgment, even in the form of just disciplinary, like being a vegan, for example, around a non-vegan, it calls into question our behaviors. We look at somebody else's behavior and go, why are they doing that? It contradicts my behavior. And so when we see that, we ask a question to ourselves, like, can we justify what we are doing? And through that, we start this ball rolling where we start going like, can I give good reasons as to why I behave this way? And ultimately, that frees us from our nature, from what we thought was right in the first place. It lets us construct ourselves. We are acting in a way that is truly authentic. Because without that, we're controlled by our desires, by our urges, by our compulsions.
A terrible thought crept like a snake into my brain. Hunting was beginning to bore me.
Is that such a terrible thought, Count?
It is, my dear lady, when hunting has been the whip for all other passions. When I lost my love of hunting, I lost my love of life.
We're controlled by our culture, our society, those socially conditioned norms that prescribe certain behaviors onto us. And without calling ourselves into question, are we even free? Now, some people like to see freedom as just being unrestricted, like doing what you want. But how much does it matter when you're doing what you want, when you're unrestricted, but what you want wasn't even made by you? You haven't thought about it. You've never really considered it. You're just doing what feels good. Is that what you truly want? Are those the values you want to propagate within society? Now, that is the benefit of ethics. It gives us this opportunity. Now, to give you more of an anecdotal story about it, Laura did this to me. She never pushed veganism onto me, right? She never once she kind of did tell us that this was wrong, like a couple of times, but we argued so much that should have stopped. She was like, no, you know what? You'll come to your own conclusions. You know the crack. Because I had already read into veganism a little bit. So she just acted as a vegan around us. And by doing that, she really gave me the opportunity to see that what I was doing wasn't right. Like that I had no real justification for causing the suffering, death, and exploitation of animals for something as meaningless as a chicken burger or something as meaningless as boots or something like that. And it allowed me to free myself from this behavior that didn't propagate the values that I truly wanted to see within the world. To see myself as someone good. How could I behave so barbarically, so selfishly? And I think without that, I would be living a very inauthentic life. And don't get me wrong, I'm certainly not morally perfect, and none of us are, but I appreciate the opportunity that Laura gave me in this situation. And, it's something that I'll always be grateful for. And I think that's something that your family might end up being grateful for, John. They might look at it and go, you know what, I was wrong. And even if they don't, even if you give them an opportunity and they go, you know what, I was right, at least you've gave them the opportunity to posit their own desires, to use their rationality to judge for themselves what right and wrong is. Okay? And without that, can we at all say we are free?
And go fishing, or I don't feel bad for people going to McDonald's and getting hamburgers.
They're making our food out of people.
Like, life is tough. Life has so many ethical dilemmas, and I think vegans tend to focus too much on certain things and perhaps ignore other things that can be as important to look at.
Silent breed is people!
There are so many people who are extremely pushy with their message, so intense about judging people and hating people for eating meat, but then they have no problem taking money from people who are working crazy hours or whatever, in sweatshops in China and that kind of stuff. Like, I'm not saying that it's one thing is better than the other. I'm just saying there are loads of different aspects to life and ethical dilemmas that we find ourselves in just by being human beings.
So I think this idea that vegans don't care about other issues within the moral domain seems to be unfounded to me. I don't see any evidence that vegans don't care as much as the average everyday person about other social issues, the social justice issues, for example. That being said, I also do think that this is a too quo quo fallacy if you would actually use it as a reason, as a justification. You're answering a criticism with a criticism. Like, well, I would go vegan, but, child labor in, India is a real problem. Well, yeah, it is. What has that got to do with animal exploitation? It doesn't answer the first question. So it's like an appeal to hypocrisy, right? Regardless, I think that ethical dilemmas do create shades of grey within society. Sometimes it can be difficult to know how to behave, right? We'll go into a situation like something like, your pants split. You're in a situation where you've only got money for a cheap pair of jeans. Now you can choose to either buy the jeans or go pantless, right? When you're buying the jeans, you're supporting child labor or even slave-like conditions for, exploited workers. And, if you don't buy them, well, then you're going to be not only hindered in the social aspect of it, but even economically and in other ways. So I would say that this is a confliction of duties. You have a duty to yourself and you have a duty to, society and other people. It's tragic when you have to choose between one duty or another. That being said, veganism is not one of those situations. It's a confliction between right and wrong. And in this situation, I would posit acting as a vegan in the sense that avoiding animal exploitation, not eating animals, not, consuming animal products as right, and wrong being, the consumption of them. And it's something that's easily avoided. You don't really have a moral obligation which would force you to act one way or the other. You kind of do in most other circumstances. That's why veganism is so clear-cut for the most part, because it's easy to do, it's achievable, we know how, right? Just to finalize this video, just to summarize, I think, John, really consider whether you think rejecting this label will actually bring a greater benefit to the vegan community, and whether you can really justify that, or is it something that you just want to do because it's going to make your life a bit easier. So keep in mind that veganism at this time is our primary defense ideologically against animal cruelty and exploitation, environmental catastrophe, and the most virulent health epidemic the world has ever seen, or at least the West has ever seen. So we need to sort this out. And I think veganism is genuinely, and I think can be very much agreed to be a solution to these problems. And I really, truly hope, John, that you don't do anything like Kalel's done, or any Stella Ray or anyone like that, who they've just went and they've just betrayed all of the ethics that they once stood for. But, time will tell, and I have faith in John, actually. I think he's a good guy, and let's hope that he comes back. And as always, try to gain some perspective.